Right, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. This is Wendy speaking through the interpreter cat, so we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Thrilled to be here. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for inviting me to give this presentation today. This is a very exciting time. Lots of different things happening and lots of different features that we're adding, testing them, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. So for example, just about 15 minutes or half an hour ago, we were trying to test the capability of streaming the Zoom platform onto the hub screen so that you could see both me and the interpreter at the same time. And unfortunately, that didn't work. Just as I predicted, it unfortunately was not able to be delivered in real time. It was a little bit slow and choppy. So we decided to drop that, and that's why you can only see me, and the interpreter is only visible in the Zoom room that we're in. But I think that's a good example of the research process, right? We try things out, we see what works, we take copious notes, and then we can inform Hub on what could be improved in the future. All right, so to start, of course, you can see my title, Paradigm Shifts in Interactive Virtual Environments. And the focus, of course, is on deaf people. So first, I want to give just a little bit of background about myself. So my name, of course, is Wendy Dannels, and I am a research professor and also the director of the XR Access Solutions Lab. And I'm located in the Center on Culture and Language at TID. So my focus is on real-time, interactive, and immersive technologies, and specifically related to accessibility and inclusion, and even more specifically related to deaf people. So my understanding is that I am not, before that. So yes, so I'm sorry, I'm not an octopus. I cannot at the same time both type in chat and sign at the same time and fly at the same time and move around hubs at the same time. So I am taking a very simple and lightweight approach to this today. So thank you for your understanding. And later I would be happy to give my contact information to you if you would like. So again, the PowerPoint should also be very clear so that it's easy to see both the PowerPoint and myself presenting at the same time. So I imagined people gathering on hubs and people coming from many different walks of life. So I think that it's also important to give another snapshot, which is, again, to narrow down to exactly where I work. So I work at the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTID, which is one of 9 colleges, including 2 credit-bearing units of Rochester Institute of Technology, and I'm located in Rochester, New York. There are more than 19,000 students at RIT, and more than 1,100 of them are deaf or hard of hearing. And again, there are several different colleges that are part of RIT. We have quite a large campus. And then there are also 2 international campuses as well in other countries. And I mentioned this, and why NTID is special is because it is very accessible. It is the largest technical institute for the deaf in the world. And because of that, NTID provides a number of staff interpreters. Last year, there were over 82,000 hours of interpreting services provided just in the classroom. And then another 35,000 hours of interpreting that were provided outside of the classroom for other activities. And that's only in one academic year. And so now you can see why I say that this is the most accessible university. So now I want to narrow down even a little bit further to the deaf population at NTID to give you a better idea of the population itself. Who are the deaf students that we have on campus? So about 40% of the deaf students use hearing aids. About half of them have cochlear implants. And about 14% of them use both. And then 14% of them don't use any hearing assistive devices. And personally, I don't use either hearing aids or cochlear implants. And the reason I mention that is because I want you to understand that we have a very diverse deaf student population on campus. Next, I'll talk about communication modes. So at PID, 38% of the deaf students can speak and use spoken English. 37% of them rely on using ASL, American Sign Language. 19% of them use both spoken language and sign language. And then 6% use other types of communication, maybe other languages or something else outside of those two. But again, here I want to emphasize the diversity in our student population. And my work is only focused on deaf people who use sign language. There is a lot of discussion, a lot of publications, and a lot of research on language, but my focus today is not on language more generally, but specifically on ASL and using an interpreter with ASL. And excuse me, my research is not on captions, but on ASL and on interpreting. So I also want to emphasize the importance of the words in my abstract that I'd like you to keep in mind. So I focus on 3D space, so the X, Y, and Z axis. That's one thing that's unique about my work. The second thing that's unique is the integration of American Sign Language. And then also related to discussions about the hub and service providers using the hub, and how interpreters as well can use the hub. Because of the COVID pandemic, we were forced to try lots of new things very quickly, to experiment with a lot of technology on the fly. And I think that really was a blessing in disguise, because we learned a lot from it. I mean, look where we are today. I also want to take just 2 seconds to focus on this picture that you should be able to see on the screen next to me. I'd like to ask, what do you see here?
It looks a little bit cartoonish. You can see this picture looks a bit cartoonish. The eyes, the mouth, how it's kind of in a straight line. Very standard. And the question is that deaf friendly? Is that picture deaf friendly? That's something for you all to think about. Now, I will be using the next slides to explain my story beginning with last fall, to help you get a sense of what a person who is deaf or hard of hearing experiences commonly.
Hi, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can we pause for one moment? The captions disappeared and we want to bring them back in. So, thank you.
Okay, sure, yes, no problem at all. Yes, we'll wait for the captions.
Sorry about that. We're doing that right now.
No problem. I love claws. Love it. Testing the captions now.
Yes, so they are coming in right now. I will position them for Jolie. All right. There we go. 1 second.
Awesome.
They're back. Now, please proceed.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So as I mentioned, these experiences that I will be sharing with you all as you're listening, I want you to think how moving forward you can help others and you can improve things for others moving forward. The goal is for us all to work together for a better future for everyone. Last year, early fall, RIT had an annual symposium. A symposium called Frameless. It's an annual symposium that they host, and typically on campus, traditionally, but because of COVID-19, they shifted to completely online. They sent the information to people who would be interested in being a moderator for various presentations. I decided I would volunteer. I could moderate one of the sessions for the symposium, so I signed up to do so. And guess what happened? I'll show you. So they sent me a copy of the schedule, which I took a look at. And I was assigned to moderate 3 different presentations, different colleges across the country. But then at the bottom, I clicked on something that said 12:30 a.m. was a meetup in Hubs with the presenter. I thought that should be interesting. I wasn't sure how that was going to work. So from the information I received, I learned that all moderators would plan to have a Zoom room, and a presenter would come in and do their presentation, and then the next presenter would present, and then the following presenter, etc. And then everyone in the audience from Zoom, as well as the presenters, would then move over to Hubs for that social time for questions and answers and discussion opportunities. And that was the concept and the idea for the entire symposium. That was the format planned. I'll show you the next slide. I decided immediately to call the interpreter for the Hubs on campus to come, for the person on Access Services to come to meet with us, because this was new. I needed to figure out how I would be able to interact and socialize within Hubs. This was new for everyone. So you can see this picture here. That was the first time we tested this and had discussions about what we wanted to try, what might work, what might not work, and figure out what we might be able to do. So during that period of testing, we did come up with a few ideas. One example was that all committee members for the Frameless Symposium would wear a specific colored shirt so that we would know that we were moderators, right? So that was one potential solution. And then a second potential solution Now you see another avatar here. It's a really bright yellow. You can't miss it, really. And there's a big label that says interpreter on their front, on their arm, and on their back. Interpreter, clearly seen from every view. The reason for this was because many avatars would be mingling in this space, and we wanted deaf individuals to be able to easily identify the interpreter and tag on to them to be able to use them in that space. So we had those first two ideas. And then thirdly, we thought that potentially the people who join the hubs might not be very experienced with this platform at all. So we needed to think about how to address that and how to help people navigate hubs from the get-go. We needed to help them learn how to call the interpreter and use the interpreter in this situation. So we started online documentation and showed, you can see examples here of the three potentials. The first is instructions for those who use sign language, like myself, who might be deaf. The next guide for interpreters themselves and how interpreters can navigate within hubs. The third was to provide a Zoom link. And that would allow for communication if needed. So we thought we would post that information. And when a person enters hubs, you would see the chat right away that says, please click on Zoom, this Zoom link, please click here, and so on. So right now in this hubs, you see a big screen here where I'm signing. You can see me presenting. But last year, instead we had Zoom projected into that space. So someone could go to that wall where the Zoom was posted and grab onto it, basically, and connect it to themselves, the avatar. So then I would walk around with the Zoom video along with me. And the person in the Zoom screen that I'm pulling along with me is the interpreter. So basically, I'm walking along with the interpreter alongside. So you can see this picture about here showing when people enter the room and you see the yellow right away. And then on the screen, you see what to do. The picture you see on this current slide is after several rounds or several iterations of playing and testing with this to find the best picture of a good small group chat. You'll see people moving around in the space and looking at each other. And then you'll also see the interpreter. Really, people just need a little bit of practice with it. The picture you see on this current slide. So on that screen, you see four people in the screen. Two of them are the interpreters, the one on the top. The second one is quiet and not moving, really. They're staying pretty still, but it's a new experience again. So the top left picture of the interpreter They were really motivated trying to figure out how to do this and how to learn how to do this new technology. The interpreter on the bottom has many years of experience in the field, but not so tech savvy, and they're very unsure of what to do and how to navigate this space. So it becomes up to the tech savvy interpreter to take over sometimes and run with it the whole way. Another thing that you see on this picture here of the Zoom screen, it's also to make sure that I don't block other views for other people with my Zoom screen here. You know, it's down in front of me so that I can see other people and see the space that I'm moving around in. So something to think about here. Suppose I'm walking somewhere and I start to walk to a different space and the interpreter loses track of me, and then they have to follow me and track me and catch up with me. You know, they walk around with me basically. It's kind of like an interpreter being at the computer with their joystick, kind of having to navigate in the space while they're also trying to interpret. That can be a lot. So having to navigate in the space as well as interpret at the same time, or sign, communicate, can be pretty tough. It can be tough. It's a lot of work. But this experience I was just talking about was with a small group. I was the only deaf person in a small group of individuals. This would be good for maybe one-on-one interactions or potentially large situations, but we might need more interpreters for that. But situations change and strategies have to change based on the situation. You have to be flexible. So that's the big picture from November 2020, starting at that point in time. But now I will shift my focus to talk a bit more about something a bit different now. So I'll have you think about the deaf community. It's important to understand that deaf people want to be a member of a community and contribute to the deaf community and deaf culture. It's important to deaf people. Their primary language is sign language here in America, American Sign Language. The National Association of the Deaf explains that ASL, American Sign Language, ASL is the shape, the placement, the movement of the hands, as well as facial expressions and body movements. All those 5 things I listed come together to comprise ASL. And that is how we convey our information. It has its own grammar, its own grammatical rules, and it is unique. It is special to the deaf community. Now, focusing more on deaf culture. Our primary sense is our eyes. That's what we use and rely on above everything. Eye contact, or the ability to see other people, is very important. If a person wants to get someone else's attention, they typically will bang on a table or wave their hands or tap the other person on the arm or shoulder, or maybe walk across the room to flash the lights to get someone's attention. That is part of deaf culture. We become used to that and very comfortable with it. It becomes part of our lives. Now, remember that the examples that I give do not apply to every deaf individual. It is important to remember how one person interacts is different from how another person interacts. And how you would interact typically, is that how we would interact in hubs? It is not. It's completely different. So there are different communication approaches that we need to look at. We need to think about language, grammar, the chat options. As you see in this Hubs room right now, you'll notice the video is pretty large. You can see me pretty large on the screen. If you're looking at this on your phone, you'd probably have to squint to see it. You probably wouldn't be able to see that video very well. So that's something that we would have to take into consideration, the size of the video. Another thing that needs to be taken into consideration is when you enter Hubs and you start looking around, it's important to have some type of help center or a help desk or help person that you can go to and figure out how to get help from there to be able to navigate the space and use it appropriately. Another example, a real world example, is in a classroom where an interpreter is present. It's a large auditorium classroom and the deaf student is in the front of the room, the front row. The interpreter is interpreting up front, moving around the professor or the presenter. So then a student sitting behind the deaf student has a question or a comment. It's very common for an interpreter to say, that person with the pink shirt back in the far corner, and then continue interpreting. They will give a little bit of information about where in the room the person speaking is located and what they look like, so that the deaf person, me for example, could take a moment and look back to find the person who is speaking, or just imagine where they might be in the room and make those connections with what's actually happening. And the reason I mention this example is because of the space. And we think about this Hubs space. If people are behind me or beside me or in front of me or above me, they're all in different places. And not only that, but our attention is not focused in one space, one location. It might move around. And like an owl, we are unlike owls. We cannot look all the way behind us. We cannot turn our head all the way around to see what's behind and beside us. I can't do that, unfortunately. None of us really can. So instead, we have to think of different options or different approaches to addressing these various challenges. And these challenges can lead to good opportunities.
All right, so next, I have a question for everyone here. When you came into this Hubs room today, when you first came in, did you receive any instructions? Did you get any information about how to use it? Did it ask, do you need any accommodations? I think you already know the answer yourselves. that's also something that we had to think about. So as the host or the coordinator of an event like this, an event taking place in Hubs, has to think ahead of time about who will be joining this room and what might their needs be. And it's very important to ask people what they might need of space, because it takes time to prepare any necessary accommodations. And although it does take time, again, it goes back to the quality of service and the accessibility, which is so important. So that's something to keep in mind, especially for anyone who's hosting or coordinating an event that's happening on Hubs or in virtual space. And it also, again, requires planning ahead of time. Planning something with just a day ahead of time isn't enough time. It really needs to be several weeks. Even just, for example, the interpreting agency may not understand what Hubs is. We may have to do some troubleshooting to make sure that is working and audio is working. How do we take turns? How do the interpreters take turns? How will we manage Q&A? There are a lot of different details and logistics questions to think about ahead of time. And so then now, if we're thinking about interpreters specifically and service providers, they will typically look for the person that they are assigned to interpret for. An interpreter will get their assignment number, they'll go to that place, but the interpreter may not be familiar with Hubs. And so again, it may take some instructions, it may need a rehearsal, there may need to be a dry run for the interpreter to become acclimated to this type of space. And that's very important to think about. One big challenge that I have noticed so far is how interpreters can follow deaf individuals without, again, having to deal with that issue of both navigating with your hands using a keyboard and signing or interpreting at the same time. That has been a challenge, and that's one of the key areas of concern that we need to solve. I think that once that's resolved, that will increase the communication capacity and the communication flow for all of us. So now if we shift over to VR, we need to think about the headsets, VR headsets. So whether the headset is a fully immersive experience, whether you can see the environment around you or not at all, it is exciting to be in that type of immersive environment. It's very cool. And really, the first time people do it, it usually blows their minds. It is very cool. But there are a few things that we have to consider about that type of environment. So for example, if I'm using a fully immersive headset, but someone is at the door ringing the doorbell, I wouldn't know. And so that's one of the types of details that we need to figure out how to get VR systems to provide that type of information about what's going on environmentally in real space around you while you're wearing an immersive headset. And that's just one example. There are many more. I also want to tell you a quick story. This happened a few years ago. A group of people were excited to create something new. And during that era, this was around 2014 to 2019 or so. And one of the ideas that came out of that time was signing gloves. People submitted competitions, they wrote grant proposals for it, they developed prototypes. We saw this pop up all over the place, these gloves that could translate sign language. And it seemed very exciting for a time. But however, in the deaf community, we realized that it really wasn't going to work because we know all of these other features of SL. The Atlantic magazine actually has a very good publication that explains why sign language gloves don't work. It is a beautiful explanation. And there's a quote in that article that says, obviously, they did not check with the deaf community. So I want to emphasize that again as well. Anytime that you're developing content or creating something new, even on a VR platform, please keep that in consideration. And again, don't forget that deaf people use different communication modes. Deaf people have different hearing abilities. And getting feedback from diverse deaf people will lead to a better product. So now if we look towards the future of VR, the future work, so let me share a concept with you. Of course, you know Earth, E-A-R-T-H, but let's switch that to E-Y-E-T-H, IF. So we'll change the idea of hearing to the idea of vision. So this is an alternate world we can imagine where no one uses audition, no one hears. And people who do hear are considered to be a little bit different, maybe a little bit odd, where people who can't hear anything are able to develop content and live their lives freely as they wish. So now some of you may be wondering about that. And I just want to share a couple future predictions related to hubs or other social interactive platforms. So here I'm showing on the slides one product called J5 Create, which is a pretty good 360-degree camera that allows a full 360-degree view, and it can be plugged into anything, but it allows a person to see entirely all the way around them. And so with this type of camera, it would be easy to identify who's talking, who's behind you, for example, especially for me as a deaf person. And there are also different settings that can change the type of video that it streams. So I would encourage you to take a look at this product. And also to think about development of other products like this that can improve accessibility for deaf and hard of hearing people. So this video camera is currently available. The next slide that I'll show you is not currently available on the market. So this is completely new. This has not been released to the public yet. It will be in beta testing in the first quarter of 2022. And this is an actual 360-degree camera that can also provide real-time video of its entire surroundings. And this new product is being developed by a number of different companies that have received funding for it, and it's very exciting. This company has received over 20 letters of intent from people who would like to participate and help develop this product. And it's really being geared towards VR marketing. So I'm very excited about this. I'm looking forward to a day where I can be able to see avatars who are real interpreters using my natural language of ASL. And that way everyone can have conversations with each other on an equal playing field. So I will close my presentation here, 7:50, I'm right on time. And at this point, I'm happy to open it up to any questions. And I will let Thomas, I suppose, take the lead now, or whoever else would like to facilitate Q&A. Please let me know how we should proceed with Q&A at this point.
Yes, I'll facilitate, and I think we're requesting everyone type your questions into chat, if that's all right. And I'm going to kick us off with one question, but please kick off any questions you have, please type them into chat. So I asked, is the yellow sign language avatar available to reuse? It was shown from the Frame VR conference.
Yes. Yeah, you can. You just, it really is simply just a yellow avatar. So you can easily make your own. Absolutely. It should be very easy. There are instructions available that explain how to make custom avatars. So it's really just a question of making the avatar yellow and then adding that extra text to it.
Excellent. And now we have a question from David, which I will read out and is being communicated. Has anyone considered how you can use the same sign language gloves technology, but rather than attempting to convert gestures into text, speech, but provide a virtual representation of these signs in the VR environment?
That's an excellent question. I had a feeling that someone would ask me about that. So avatars are very cool. The technology now is not quite there yet. It's not quite good enough to allow for real-time signing with all of the details that are necessary. It can't do that smoothly yet. And so people now are thinking more about sign language recognition. There have been a few different articles and publications here and there, but a full working 3D spatial model of ASL has not yet been created. I do know of one program that allows a person to use a webcam, and then it can identify finger spelling and create specific hand shapes in a virtual space. And it's pretty good, but it is very slow. I think that is possibly something that could happen in the future. That's not something that I'm working on. I prefer to have real-time video personally.
This is a non-technology question, but I had a just deaf etiquette question because we had some discussion in part of your presentation, but I had an experience, this was actually just a couple of days ago, riding a bus in Japan. It's usually very quiet, and there was sound coming loudly from a person's mobile phone. And when I looked over, I saw them signing on FaceTime, with a sign language friend. So my assumption is they didn't know that the sound was playing out loud. Like, what would be a polite way, or what should be an interaction to let someone know that's happening?
That is an excellent question, a really excellent question. Thank you for asking. Often, you're right, often deaf people unintentionally may have their microphones on. I've done that myself in Zoom before. It happens. And so it's typically polite for someone to send, in Zoom, for example, for someone to send me a private chat just to say, hey, did you know that your microphone is on? I'm not sure that you meant to do that. And so I think the same thing could be done on a bus, for example. You could write a short note and just say, just for your information, I just wanted to let you know that your sound was on in case you didn't realize it. And most of the time, deaf people will be happy that someone told them, and they'll be happy to turn off their sound. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Thank you, Wendy. I need the Japanese translation of that, but that's what I will work on getting for the future. Any other questions here? And I'm just going to check the YouTube stream quickly.
Thomas, that's your homework assignment.
Thank you. Yes, it really will be. I have a Japanese meeting with Japanese teachers, so I'll learn that. So I'll ask one more question. Oh, wait, we have one here from Kristen Lloyd. As many people use VR spaces for personal use online games, I feel there will be a need for cartoonish avatars with the capability to have full communication. How long do you think we have until we can have hardware that can take facial expressions and present them in the virtual space?
That is another good question. So body movements, facial expressions, distance in space, both vertical distance and horizontal distance, all of those things come together to form language. And if, I mean, I would think a few years at least, I would think. I can't promise anything. I don't know one way or the other. I would like it to be sooner than that, but I'm really not sure that's possible any sooner.
All right, and thank you, Wendy. We have one last question that we will take today from David. In a previous Alley VR project meeting, there was discussion of whether live captioning for participants in a meeting should be positioned directly under the presentation rather than directly under the avatar speaking. What are your thoughts?
Sure. So I think it depends on the goal, and it depends where the avatar is as well. So the best thing to always do is to ask the deaf person in the audience what would work best for them. If it were me, for example, I would maybe prefer the captions to be next to the person who's speaking. However, the captions also need to be in front of my visual field of view as well. So if a person is speaking behind me, I would want to see the captions in front of me if I needed to look ahead. It's always helpful in captions to have the speaker ID so that I know who's speaking. And so I think the most important thing is to ask the person from the deaf community who's using captions what their preference is. Many people have different preferences and they have good reasons for their choices.
All right, well, I want to say thank you so much to our presenter tonight, Wendy Dannels. We really appreciated the presentation tonight, and we have taken notes, and even at the very beginning, thanks to Wendy for kind of helping clarify, and something we want to work with the Hubs team on, for thinking about streaming maybe Zoom into this space. But definitely learned a lot, and I invite you all, if you want to stick around for a few minutes after our stream ends. We're going to stay in the room and be happy to connect either via chat. You can use avatar video camera here in Hubs, or we can go off of mute, but we will need to transcribe our conversations. So thank you, everyone, for coming to Accessibility VR. Our next presentation for Accessibility VR will be next month. It's going to be more for a European time zone. So it'll be, I believe, 8 a.m. start for East Coast US, and a 2 p.m. time for Central European time, which will be adapting VR games for people with disabilities. We hope to see you there. We want to say thank you to the sign language interpreters tonight, Nikki and Kat, and we want to say thank you to the closed captioning support from Texas Captions. And finally, thank you to Jolie McPhee from the Accessibility Special Interest Group from the Internet Society in New York. Without all these people helping us, we would not be able to have an event that can be streamed on YouTube and made accessible to everyone. And so thank you, everyone, for all of your help in making this event accessible. And as always, too, please feel free to communicate with Meryl or I, either via the meetup or via our emails, for any suggestions you have for how we can improve. We always want to keep moving this technology forward and learning together. So again, let's end with a big thank you for Wendy. And if you want, you can use some emojis here in Hubs. Maybe press 1, you can be happy, share some emojis. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Dr. Waddell. Thank you, David. Desiree, thanks, Matt. Oh, and here's the